To this day, Channel Orange is known for being an unconventional and stellar album that bent genres, exceeded expectations, and delved deeper into the mind of Frank Ocean, who threatened the idea of genres and labels with artistic fluidity and is still a major moment within pop culture today. I really had to do Channel Orange. I did a re-listen of Blonde fairly recently, but Channel Orange has a special place in my heart because early high school, this was the first time that I really delved into sort of alternative R&B on my own, and I gotta say, I had such a good time with it. So I had to look more into this album. Now, his debut studio album, Channel Orange, dropped in July of 2012 under Def Jam Records, following his mixtape, Nostalgia Ultra, which was released in 2011. This mixtape had such a hold on me back then, oh my god. And the fact that I have to say back then now is crazy for 2011. So Channel Orange was recorded in Hollywood, and they also used one studio that had recording equipment way back from the 1960s. At one point, he wanted to rent the recording equipment and a mansion in Beverly Hills instead of paying the $1,600 that was expected for a day in the studio. The album was named in reference to graphene color synthesia, which is when someone associates colors with letters and numbers. I hope I said that right. Which was interesting because I remember Pharrell explaining a very similar situation that he feels within his Lego movie Piece by Piece, which if you have not seen that, please check it out. I'm a sucker for Lego movies anyway, but that's the cutest freaking Lego movie. And then to pair it with music and like rappers, Kendrick Lamar, it was so freaking adorable. Frank felt the color orange during the summer of his first love, hence the album name and the title involving the color orange. And he wrote a very beautiful post for Tumblr, and the Tumblr post was initially intended to be within the thank you section of the album. I think the story for the album comes from this particular part of the post. 4 summers ago, I met somebody. I was 19 years old, he was too. We spent that summer and the summer after together, every day almost. And on the days when we were together, time would glide. Most of the day I'd see him and his smile. I'd hear his conversation and his silence until it was time to sleep. Sleep I would often share with him. By the time I realized I was in love, it was malignant. It was hopeless. There was no escaping, no negotiating with the feeling. No choice. It was my first love. It changed my life. I sat there and told my friend how I felt. I wept as the words left my mouth. I grieved for them, knowing I could never take them back for myself. He patted my back. He said kind things. He did his best, but he wouldn't admit the same. He had to go back inside soon. It was late and his girlfriend was waiting upstairs. He wouldn't tell the truth about his feelings for me for another 3 years. I felt like I'd only imagined reciprocity for years. Now imagine being thrown from a cliff. No, I wasn't on a cliff. I was still in my car, telling myself it was going to be fine and to take deep breaths. I took the breaths and carried on. The full Tumblr post is in my description, and I would definitely recommend reading it. The album itself contains psychedelic, funk, soul, jazz, pop, R&B, and electric styles within different tracks, including the interludes that contain dialogue and audio from films. I do have to note that there is a lot of experimentation with his voice, and the album highlights the struggles of love, social status and class, drugs, through storytelling that falls along the lines of surrealism and darkness, which Frank is very, very good at. Channel Orange was actually released a week early by Frank and the label to prevent leaks from happening. And in terms of that darkness, there's a quote and it says, "Frank is able to tell dark cinematic stories with a screenwriter's eye for a character," which is very, very accurate. He had this to say about Channel Orange being the follow-up to Nostalgia Ultra. It distinctly defines me as an artist for where I am right now, and that was the aim. If I write 14 stories that I love, then the next step is to get the environment of music around it to best envelope the story in all kinds of sonic goodness. I do have to say during my research that I found a number of interviews where the interviewer will note that Frank is very, very, very shy, but once he starts talking about his music, he opens up a little bit more, and that's That's fitting, I think. He'll avoid eye contact at first and everything, and I just thought that was crazy how nearly all of the interviewers said the same thing. I also found one New York Times interview where Frank just straight up says that he does not like journalists and that the most important thing that people can do is just to sit there and listen to the music. This is part of the reason why his stage name is not on the album cover. According to an interview he did with the New York Times, he was kicked out of a private school for fighting, and then he was transferred to a public school, thus beginning his knack for taking joy in being able to hide in plain sight. And about this specifically, Frank said, "I remember getting there and being so happy to be there because I could disappear." He noted that his songwriting was, quote, "definitely an extension of my talk therapy." And I found this interesting too. Along the lines of this, within that same article, he says, "The work is the work. The work is not me." I like the anonymity that directors can have about their films. Even though it's my voice, I'm a storyteller. Like, sharing bits of his personality within different interviews and everything is important to kind of delve into his mindset when he's working and his personality and everything. So to share his stories with the world, Frank worked closely with producer and songwriter Malay for the album, and they began writing songs for the album in February of 2011. Now, Frank already had some experience writing songs for different artists like Brandy, Justin Bieber, Beyonce, and Malay and Frank had already worked together before Frank kind of blew up. So eventually they started writing demos for different artists before they started working on Channel Orange. In an interview with Complex, Malay said that the album discussions didn't really happen. They just aligned creatively, dropped nostalgia. Then within 2 to 3 months, loosely, they wrote nearly the entire album for Channel Orange. He said they didn't write a ton of songs and have that stress over narrowing down for a track list. There were already previous songs that were worked on already that Frank felt could fit within the album, so they worked really hard to integrate those in. Malay also stated in the interview that they ended up mixing the album themselves, which wasn't the original plan. In the same interview, he said, "I'm the type of producer where I'm kind of a more old school mentality of where I just want to be behind the scenes and just kind of help artists develop their sound." Nowadays, a lot of producers have their own signature sound, and no matter who they work with, it all has that certain flavor. I'm kind of the opposite. I almost want to be transparent, kind of be far under the radar. Frank also worked with Omaz Keith and Pharrell Williams for the album. I think one of the coolest bits of info that I found was the fact that Frank credited his dog as an executive producer on the album. His dog's name is Everest, and that's so freaking cute. I feel like that's something I would do. I'd totally credit Callie on like nearly everything I do. Frank wrote a lot of the songs to go along with Malay's ideas and wrote songs often by improvising using Malay's keyboard and guitar and kind of having these jam sessions to figure out the direction that they want to go in. And I believe from my research, I gathered that the album was probably finished writing within 2 to 3 months. It was said that Frank felt way more confident when writing for the album this time around. He typed the lyrics on his laptop as opposed to composing in his head as he had did for Nostalgia. Since he was used to already writing for other artists, he was able to take his personal experiences from dating and love and apply all of that to his personal work, which was a very important time for him personally as a Black queer man. In an article with The Guardian, Frank stated, "I knew that I was writing in a way that people would ask questions. I knew that my star was rising, and I knew that if I waited, I would always have somebody that I respected be able to encourage me to wait longer, to not say it till who knows when. It was important for me to know that when I go out on the road and I do these things, that I'm looking at people who are applauding because of an appreciation for me. I don't have many secrets, so if you know that and you're still applauding, it may be some sort of sick validation, but it was important to me. When I hear people talking about certain, pronouns in the writing of the record, I just wanted to, like I said on the Tumblr post, offer some clarity before the fire got too wild and the conversation became too unfocused and murky." After the album was done being written, Frank arranged all of the tracks to the order that we have for the track list and recorded the songs in that order, according to Malay. This is from the New York Times. On a dry erase board in his apartment, Frank wrote the names of the songs and the interludes with a red Sharpie and began playing around with their placement. Even though they were all sketches, Ocean says, there was so much comfort because I heard in my head how it was going to sound. Now all I've got to do is finish it. Frank recorded the vocals alone for 9 months before collaborating with Malay for the production side, with Malay stating that Frank was a perfectionist. I think we kind of know that very, very well by now. An article from Reverb noted that most of the takes were recorded with vintage microphones and utilized 2 workhorse condensers, the Neumann U47 and a Telefunken 251. It also says for an intimate live control room feel, Frank would also use a Shure SM58. And then for his vocals, a Neve 1073 preamp with either a TubeTech CL1B opto compressor or a Fairchild 670 were used for a warmer and more lush sound. I love learning about all the different instruments, even though I have no idea how to use most of them right now. I still think it's the coolest freaking thing ever. Now, Frank did produce most of Channel Orange himself, even though he did get a lot of help from Malay, who played bass, guitar, brass instruments, and the keyboard. There were a lot of different keys used throughout the album: Rhodes electronic pianos, Hammond organs, and arpeggiated synths are listed in the Reverb article too. Malay said that most of what was done on Channel Orange was made using keyboards made by Arturia, with Arturia's V collection being a favorite for Malay. From the Reverb article, I was able to find a forum post from Malay himself on Gearspace, where he lists out all of the gear that was used for the album. That was a cool find. He said in the forum, a lot of these plugins sound great if you treat them properly and take them out of the box. It also makes me feel better as I approach the plugins more like a sound module. It allows me to think about the most important things, which are the parts and the sound. Pyramids is an example of how creative Malay is and where he really shines when it comes to layered plugins being paired with original analog synths. The synth in the first half is from a Spectrasonics Omnisphere, and the analog bell sound is from a Roland Juno 106. I do have notes behind me because there's no way I was gonna remember all of this. The choir sounds in Pyramids is from a GeForce M-Tron Mellotron emulator. That sounds crazy. Instrumentation and live production were super important here, as this was a major departure from the well-used sample-heavy mixtape that came before Channel Orange. Love nostalgia. Now, according to the comment left by Malay on the forum, as far as guitars go, Malay played a Fender Stratocaster along with a Gibson Les Paul and an ES 335, ran through either a Fender Princeton or a Vox AC30 amp. He had Electro Voices RE20 or Biernamix Classic Ribbon M160 pointed at the amp. As far as the bass, Malay played on most of those tracks with the exception of Sweet Life. For the ampy tone, they mixed in an Ampeg B15 to the RE20, and for the songs that needed synth bass, he relied on Arturia again. At the beginning of his forum post, he wrote, "My writing process with most artists, including Frank, is very artist specific. I don't make tracks on my own time. I'd rather go into the studio with the artist and or writers and create from scratch. I used to do the track thing when I was younger, but it never really worked out for me. I find creating ideas from scratch with the artist is much more rewarding and allows for the song and the sound to be catered to the specific project. Typical session for me starts with me laying down some musical ideas, guitars, keys, drums, and we'll start laying down some lyric/melody concepts, keep growing it into vibe, a concept, hopefully a song. If it veers off path, I'd rather ditch it and try again another time. Throughout the years, I've realized music should never be forced." Now, within the genre space, there are a lot of different styles intertwined within the work, and this resulted in a bunch of eclectic album descriptions. Some reviewers were like, is it alt R&B? Is it neo soul? Funk psychedelic? Progressive soul? And this also brought on a lot of comparisons to major artists and big names like Prince, D'Angelo, and Erykah Badu. Now, world-building interludes aside, naturally there were a lot of comparisons between this album and Nostalgia, specifically within the instrumentation, and Channel Orange being more subtle, having more spatial arrangements, slower songs, not being so sample heavy, and being a little less hook focused. Frank reached out to Omi's Keith to help rework the songs to suit this newer direction. and they focused on the vocals and the harmonies first. Live drums were added to Crack Rock, Monks, and Sweet Life, which was going to be a digital track initially. The album itself was inspired by Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Sly and the Family Stone, Pink Floyd, and Jimi Hendrix, who were all used as musical references. In the studio, they listen to songs and then have jam sessions to see what comes out of the inspiration at the moment, which is something that I'm definitely gonna take with me from now on. They also had posters up of Pink Floyd and Bruce Lee and projected old movies without sound playing in the studio to help set the mood. Malay said in a New York Times interview, "The next thing you know, Frank's like, let me go in the booth." And he just lays it down. He's kind of like an MC, like a rapper. Rappers come in and they just write lyrics and drop it down, and he's that same way. But obviously, his lyrical concepts and melody concepts are ridiculous. There were a lot of artists and producers who really liked what Frank was doing in music, and they reached out to work together, which resulted in a number of collaborations that happened to make it on the album. He previewed a lot of the songs that he was working on to a lot of people that he looked up to, including Pharrell Williams and John Mayer. The album's mixing was done by Frank and Malay, as well as engineer Spike Stent in Los Angeles, and the album was mastered by Vlado Miller in New York, and the interludes themselves were referred to by Malay as their art project. According to the New York Times, Frank played the album for producer and founder of Def Jam, Rick Rubin, who was thoroughly impressed by Frank's voice. He also liked it so much that he told Frank to not mess with the recordings too much. Now getting into the track list. On start, the PlayStation boot up sound has always been a highlight for me, but it's like we're tuning in to find the right channel that we want. Thinking About You was released as the album's first single in April of 2012. The song was originally written by Frank for singer Bridget Kelly, and the demo was posted to his Tumblr account. The final mix for the song added strings into the intro, and it sounds kind of muffled, but fits within the feeling of the song with the love that's not being reciprocated. Fertilizer is actually a cover of the song Fertilizer, sung by James Fauntleroy. I love how this rendition is done for like a radio station. This is the point of the album where we start to get into the darker parts of the story, with him begging to be treated right while the laugh track is sort of mocking him in the background. In his Guardian interview, Frank had this to say about his natural fall into darker themes. "I would say those were the colors I had to work with on those days. Is it drawn from experience? Absolutely. I mean, experience is an interesting word. I just bear witness." Sierra Leone is one of the most chill songs on the album, and it's still one of my favorites today. I will never forget years ago how my mom walked in on me listening to this out loud when Frank sings about Trojans and pink skies. That's how I felt. I shut down. That's literally how I felt. The song goes into topics about contraception and parenthood. While Frank has feelings for a girl that compares to when a significant but bad change happens, like a sudden storm, but it stops raining and is sunny again soon after. Sweet Life was co-written and co-produced by Pharrell Williams. The bass was played by Charlie Hunter, who also played on D'Angelo's Voodoo. This was the third single from the album, and it's a song about the rich, where he talks about how younger people relish within that sort of world. The line, "Why see the world when you've got the beach," has always stuck with me. Money and happiness is the topic, and not just money. It's the comfortability of not having to live paycheck to paycheck every 1 to 2 weeks. He's aware that he has all this money, but he's not really sure what he should do with it. Super Rich Kids features an interpolation of Real Love by Mary J. Blige, and it's one of the songs that I revisit within the album the most, along with Pyramids, Lost, and Sierra Leone. There's a similar style of piano to Elton John's Benny and the Jets. I came across an article from Business Insider that compares the song to The Great Gatsby, and I totally get that, with love and a luxurious lifestyle being intertwined. Pilot Jones was very descriptive in its way of addressing drug addiction, while escapism is prominent here, with a confusing balance of love and friendship being highlighted. The lines being blurred is well portrayed, with the almost lagging feeling within the production and the vocals. New York Times noted that Rick Rubin really liked Pilot Jones, and Frank wrote the melody to a backing track, and he and Malay made a completely different backing track once the melody for the song was finished. Rick Rubin said in the article, "It's really interesting that he uses seed ideas or tools to write that really don't have anything to do with the song. It's just a way for him to access himself, and then the song comes out, and then the track is built around what he writes." Frank also said he really needed to get this song out, but he always knew that the track would have to change. The backstory to Crack Rock stood out to me the most during my research. Frank was inspired to write this song from sitting in on a Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous group that his grandfather mentored. Kind of on similar lines to Pilot Jones, Crack Rock moves through a balance of love and the highs and lows of using. He talks about violence and corruption. Also, recent re-listen, I found out this is one of my favorite beats. Frank mentions in a Guardian interview, "For a song like Crack Rock, my grandfather, who struggled to be a father for my mom and my uncle, his second chance at fatherhood was me. In his early 20s, he had a host of problems with addiction and substance abuse. When I knew him, he was a mentor for the NA and the AA groups. I used to go to the meetings and hear these stories from the addicts. So stories like that influenced a song like that." It was also brought up how his engineer wanted to kind of smooth out the vocals for the song, but Frank said, "The engineer said, 'Are we really gonna let this slide?' And I was like, yes, because that's how a smoker would sing." He went a little further into his mindset for the song, sharing with the New York Times, "It totally ingrained this fear of addiction and of anything that could cause me to be addicted." Drug use does play a major role within the album as a whole, love aside, and he also stated, "We're talking about substances, but we forget how intoxicating things that aren't tangible, things that aren't chemical substances are. You forget about it. I'm saying, love, power, money, which is power, freedom, honesty. Pyramids is a storm. Pyramids is a storm. And it's very astral and trippy. It's multi-layered, shimmering. It might be the best song written on the album. And this is where the track list really shines within the song being in the middle. It's the most pivotal part of Channel Orange. This song blends electronic, synth, and funk together in the best way and features ancient Egyptian and biblical mentions with Cleopatra and a modern day version who's a dancer at night, who has a man that's a pimp and just kind of there. There's a guy, if I can find it, I'm gonna link it, but there's a guy on TikTok who did a very in-depth analysis of the lyrics. Stellar video, amazing job. And this is one of the songs that features John Mayer playing the guitar, with the other being White. Lost was the 4th single released for the album, and it tells the story of an addict and his girlfriend who wants better for the both of them. They travel and spend time together sometimes, but there's still more to be desired, but she can't leave. I love the harmonies in this song and just the groove that it has to it. For White, featuring John Mayer, Malay said that the version of White on the album is more of an interlude. I played a lot of songs for John, see what he was into the most, and he jammed to a few things, but that's how John ended up playing on White for the album. Monks is a song that's kind of about searching for serenity within an animalistic world. It speaks to how great the songs are laid out with Bad Religion following. Bad Religion is also a storm too, honey. They didn't have a lot of string players for this song, so engineer Jeff Ellis tried to make up for that by arranging the seating for a bigger string section and used a pair of stereo ribbon headphones to capture the sound in the same room where Frank Sinatra recorded My Way. And then they moved all the players into different seats each time they played along with the song, to be able to mix all of the takes together to make it seem like there were more string players than there actually was. That kind of blew my mind when I sit here and think about it. That's insane. I love Frank treating the taxi driver as like a temporary therapist, because there's no attachment there, so there's not as much anxiety or weight held within telling all of your secrets to this person that you might not see again. He wants salvation, but is stuck in this position of wanting love but not receiving it. For Pink Matter, featuring Andre 3000, Frank reached out to both Big Boy and Andre to be featured on the song, but Andre didn't want Outkast to appear as a duo unless it was for Outkast themselves. As I mentioned before, Malay played the bass on most of the tracks for the album, but when it came to Pink Matter, he said, "On Pink Matter, I used the worst possible bass ever. It's my old Yamaha from high school. I don't know the model, but I probably paid $100 for it back then. He ended up doing a lot of work to get the sound to be the way that he wanted it, which is further delved into in the Reverb article that's in the description. Andre said in an interview with Fuse, Frank Ocean, he let me hear the song. He said, I just want you to tell a story. Honestly, I don't care what it is, just tell a story. And when I got the track, I just started writing to it. I was just happy to be a part of that whole movement and his whole movement because he has become a whole nother kind of icon in today's age. So I was just happy to be a part of the album. He's so sweet. And the song itself, Pink Matter, is very blues influenced while we're battling life and pleasure. I always thought that Forrest Gump really captured that easygoing feeling of Forrest Gump as a character himself. It seems Frank is playing the role of Jenny here. And I think, again, the fact that this is one of the last songs on the album was such a great idea from a track listing standpoint, again, because of what we've learned about Frank in the album. Frank talked about the song a little bit more with The Guardian, stating, when you write a song like Forrest Gump, the subject can't be androgynous. It requires an unnecessary amount of effort. I don't fear anybody at all. So to answer your question, yes, I could have easily changed the words, but for what? I just feel like it's another time now. I have no interest in contributing to that, especially with my art. It's the one thing that I know will outlive me and outlive my feelings. It will outlive my depressive seasons. I just love how he stands 10 toes down for the song, I swear. But Forrest Gump is very rhythmic and light and really tongue-in-cheek. For End, the line, you're special, I wish you could see what I see, is from the movie ATL. That movie was a staple growing up. Frank is facing reality as he turns off his car and takes a walk after spending time with a girl, as his dreams are still present, but he's awake now. And then Golden Girl with Tyler, the Creator. I heard this song for the first time while doing research for the album, and I'm sad we don't have it on streaming at all. And I was really into how Tyler plays kind of an opposite role to Frank, who's more lighthearted here, as he's talking about a girl that like steadies him and gives him the salvation that he was looking for and his peace. But Tyler comes in sounding crazy like a demon with that deeper, lower pitched voice. Frank stated in an interview, I've always wanted to make a career in the arts. And I think that my only hope at doing that is to make it more about the work. I enjoy singing songs in front of people. I enjoy being involved in making the artwork for albums and stupid stuff like that. I wouldn't be a part of it if I was just writing songs for others. And I said more about the music. Jeff Ellis stated within the article for New York Times his perspective of Frank at the Channel Orange listening party. From the first day, Frank never talked about what his vision was. He just executed on it. I think Blonde following up after Channel Orange was such a testament to his creative mind during that time. Of course, I would love more music from Frank. I would love to see where his mindset is nowadays, especially with how things have moved, within the LGBT plus community and with everything that's going on in the world in general. And love, like what's kind of happening there? Are you okay? Like, are we good? I would just like to hear that perspective from Frank now and to see production wise where he'd go as well. There's so many indie artists out there that are hugely inspired by Frank and all of his works and everything. And so I'd like to see where he takes his innovation in modern times, because it's crazy to think about how much time has passed. Channel Orange is considered an album that was released so long ago now that it's just, Channel Orange is such a staple album. What does his art sound like and look like and feel like now? Is it still darker, or did we get to a place where we did lighten up just a little bit? If not, totally cool. I'm here for it either way. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. My name is Rain. I don't think I said that earlier, but hi. I've already started working on my next video for my How Albums Are Made series, so make sure you subscribe for that. I also started a music blog very recently. It's called onthisrotation.com, which I'll leave up here and in the description, where I basically recommend y'all some music. You know, I recommend some tracks that I've been listening to and very into lately, so make sure you check that out. And yeah, in relation to Channel Orange, what's your favorite song from the album? What's your favorite lyric? All of that. I want to talk to y'all. What's going on? How you doing? Thank you for being here. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.